2 weeks into the conflict in Iran, the dominant narrative in Western commentary is already settling into a familiar frame. A rushed war, spiraling escalation, oil shocks, and the specter of another Middle Eastern quagmire. It is a well-worn script. It is also analytically flawed. The problem is not that the costs are being exaggerated. War is always costly. The problem is that the wrong metrics are being used. If one evaluates the campaign not through headlines, but through the classical framework of military effectiveness, such as capability degradation, loss of initiative, and strategic isolation, the conclusion is far clearer. The U.S.-Israeli coalition is winning the Iran war. This is not conjecture. It is observable in the systematic dismantling of Iran's core instruments of power. First, Iran's strike capacity is collapsing. Ballistic missile launches and drone operations have fallen sharply in both volume and operational tempo. This is not a political signal. It is a material constraint. Launchers have been destroyed, stockpiles depleted, and logistics chains disrupted. What remains is being rationed. A military that is conserving its fires is not one that is escalating. It is one managing decline. Second, the coalition has achieved what military planners would recognize as functional air dominance. The suppression of Iran's air defense network has enabled sustained operations over contested territory with minimal loss. This is decisive. Air superiority is not symbolic. It is the precondition for everything that follows, such as interdiction, precision strikes, and the destruction of industrial capacity. And that brings us to the third point. The campaign has transitioned methodically into its second phase, which is the dismantling of Iran's defense industrial base. This is not about punishing the present, but rather about constraining the future. Missile production facilities, research centers, and hardened storage sites are being targeted with a clear objective, which is to ensure that what has been destroyed cannot be easily rebuilt. This is not improvisation. It is operational design. Critics point to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz as evidence of escalation and strategic failure. In fact, it reveals the opposite. The strait was always Iran's most visible retaliatory lever. It is also a wasting asset. By disrupting maritime flows, Iran is not only imposing costs on the global economy, but is also severing its own economic lifeline. The overwhelming majority of its exports pass through that corridor. Each day of closure compounds its isolation, particularly in relation to China, its principal economic partner. In strategic terms, Iran is trading long-term viability for short-term signaling. The same misreading applies to the proxy network. Hezbollah activity, militia strikes in Iraq, and Houthi threats are cited as proof of a widening war. In reality, they are indicative of a network that has lost central coordination. When command structures are degraded, authority is pre-delegated. Actions continue, but coherence disappears. What we are witnessing is not expansion, it is fragmentation. There is, of course, a legitimate critique to be made. The political articulation of the end state has been uneven. Public messaging has oscillated between maximalist rhetoric and tactical ambiguity. That is not helpful. But strategy is not defined by press conferences. It is defined by outcomes on the ground. And the emerging outcome is clear: the progressive disarmament of Iran's ability to project power beyond its borders through missiles, nuclear latency, and proxies. For 4 decades, successive Western governments tolerated the steady accumulation of this threat. Centrifuges spun, stockpiles grew, networks expanded. Strategic patience was, in practice, strategic drift. That drift has now been reversed. None of this diminishes the human cost. Civilian casualties, regional instability, and economic disruption are real and serious. They must be acknowledged without qualification. But serious analysis requires a comparison not between war and peace, but between action and inaction. The alternative to this campaign was not stability. It was a near-term nuclear threshold state capable of coercion at a scale the region has never experienced. From a Canadian perspective, the implications are not abstract. A weakened Iran reduces systemic risk in global energy markets over the medium term, even if short-term volatility persists. It alters the strategic calculus of China, which must now reassess its reliance on unstable partners. And it reinforces a central lesson for Ottawa. Security and economic resilience are inseparable. Canada cannot afford to remain a bystander in a world where power is once again being contested in material terms. Industrial capacity, defense readiness, and alliance credibility are not theoretical constructs. They are determinants of national relevance. War is never clean, is often poorly communicated, and is always contested in the court of public opinion. But stripped of rhetoric, measured against outcomes, and assessed through the discipline of strategy rather than sentiment, the conclusion is unavoidable. The U.S.-Israeli coalition is not stumbling, it is executing, and it is winning.